Welcome to R&R Live in Life, our fourth instalment of our Cape York trip. No matter how many times I try to shorten each episode, I find there is too much country that we see that both Rick and I find interesting, and as this is our photo journal of our travels, it is hard to keep it just to the points of interest as they are secondary to our travels. Rick and I were sad to leave Elim Beach as it was such a beautiful spot, but we were on the clock as we only had the troopy for 10 days and wanted to see as much as we could in such a short space of time. Around 7:30 saw us leaving camp and making our way back through Hopevale. Seeing the sand dunes from a different angle and time of day, like most things, always gives you a different perspective, or something catches your eye as the sun hits it from a different angle. Throughout this episode I have kept a lot of road photos, just to give some idea of what we were driving on. We had heard that the road was pretty corrugated, but we did not find it that way. Yes, there are corrugations, but you get them on most gravel roads. Usually it is people who do not drive to conditions that produce them into becoming an issue. Not far from Hopevale, we turned onto the Battle Camp Road that would take us to Laura, 100 kilometres further along. About 4 kilometres from the turn-off, we crossed over the causeway near Isabella Falls, and had we not known that it was there, we would just have kept driving. We parked in a small parking area just off the road and walked down to the falls that are just below the causeway, and they turned out to be quite picturesque. Situated on the Isabella River, the falls, though small, are a magical spot. After a good wander around, we made our way back to the troopy and continued on our way. We were now on gravel. The road was well formed and in very good condition, varying from straight stretches to undulating hills and valleys. There were sections of newly laid bitumen, well guide-posted, and then it was back on the rich red earth. Cresting some of the hills gave stunning views of the landscape. It really was remarkable country. The red dirt reminded us of the Pilbara and just how red it is over there. There was such a mix of country. Most of the time the road was bordered by trees, but on the odd occasion we got to see further afield. The road appeared to be quite undulating for some distance before we could look out onto more ranges in the distance. We crossed Little Laura River, a tributary of the main Laura River, showing evidence that we were not alone on this stretch of our journey, and then it was on with more rich red gravel with sections of bitumen. The countryside began to change from the red dirt to lighter sandier gravel country with rocky areas. We passed an old disused loading ramp with dilapidated yards and wondered how long ago it had been in use. We passed rugged ranges in such stark contrast to the gravel road bordered by an assortment of trees. The road was always changing from straight stretches to gullies and rises. After Little Laura River, we seemed to have made our way through the ranges and were now heading towards more river-type country, as out through the trees we could see the occasional lower floodplain waterhole. The closer to the river we encountered more bends as we wove our way closer to Laura River, stopping to check out the old Laura Homestead free camping area on a flat area high above the river, adjacent to the old Laura Homestead. Returning to Battle Camp Road, we crossed the Laura River with huge piles of sand that had been removed from the road. The river rises on the eastern slopes of the Great Dividing Range below Mount Murray and follows the Peninsula Development Road from nearby Lakeland before flowing north through Laura. The river is joined by 16 tributaries, including the Little Laura and the Mossman River, before it empties into the Normanby River south of Hopevale. I did wonder about the huge number of mango trees, as from past experience know that flying foxes just love mangoes when they are in season. The size of some of the trees was remarkable. Just after 10 we pulled into Old Laura Homestead, a historic site built around 1902 near the junction of Lakefield and Battle Camp roads. The oldest part of the homestead dates back to as early as 1892, and Old Laura remains one of the most intact early pastoral homesteads left in the region. Rick and I were fascinated by this old homestead, set out much like where we had lived in the early 1980s. The Old Laura homestead sits on the banks of the Laura River and includes station buildings, stockyards, native and introduced trees, and vegetation, as well as the homestead grounds. The riverbank area contained a mixture of native and introduced plants, forming a corridor along the river, dominated by mature mango trees, having escaped from the early fruit garden area. Back in 1879, a lease was granted for Laura Station, now the southern end of the national park, but the lease was granted as an occupational lease, which was granted for a 12-month term, but could be converted to form part of a pastoral lease once the run had been stocked to 1/4 of its grazing capacity. Rick and I wandered around the homestead and read about Fergus O'Byrne, a young Irish immigrant who in 1879 bought Laura Station with an area of around 50 square miles, or in today's measurements 12,800 hectares, as a lease at the cost of £8 15 shillings. The area was increased, and by 1894 the property was carrying 8,000 head of cattle brought in from Dunbar Station. With its success in those days due largely to the contribution of the Aboriginal workers, as was the case with a lot of large pastoral runs in Queensland at the time. After Fergus O'Byrne's death in 1896, the lease was transferred to O'Byrne and Company, his descendants remaining with the company until 1925, before Patrick Bernard and Dave Grogan took over the lease. The Lakefield Cattle Company purchased the Laura and Lakefield properties in 1966, but abandoned Old Laura Homestead in favour of New Laura, 24 kilometres north, and unfortunately the homestead fell into disrepair, decay and vandalism reduced the Old Laura Homestead buildings to ruins. The homestead is historically significant through its links with the establishment of the cattle industry in this very isolated part of Cape York Peninsula, and its association with the Palmer River goldfield, as miners once used the track leading to the homestead as the main access to the goldfields. From Old Laura Homestead the road becomes the Lakefield Road that runs beside the Normanby River in places, past the new Lakefield Ranger Base, Kennedy Bend, and on to the ruins of Breezer Homestead. We stopped in at the Lakefield Ranger Station to check out all the information panels at the gate. Lakefield was selected as a grazing property around 1878 and was associated with the cattle industry for almost a century before its gazettal as a national park in 1979. Remnants of Lakefield pastoral heritage exist in the form of old yards, dips, internal fence lines, grave sites, and numerous old buildings and items of old machinery. Lakefield National Park is Queensland's second largest national park, extending south from Princess Charlotte Bay. The park occupies the centre of the Laura Basin, which is drained by numerous river systems including the Laura, Normanby, North Kennedy, Moorhead and Bezant rivers and their tributaries. These rivers rise in the sandstone escarpment of the Great Dividing Range and flow through the park into Princess Charlotte Bay. Lakefield is dominated by gentle rises and alluvial lands, with vegetation changing regularly from south to north, but its southern and inland areas are generally well timbered, while its northern parts are dominated by two large treeless plains. Each wet season, its extensive network of rivers, creeks and wetlands merge to flood, causing individual watercourses to lose their individual identities. From Lakefield we continued on to the ruins of Old Breezer Station Homestead beside a lagoon, with building remnants and a 100-year-old mango tree that marks the site of where once the livelihood of Sinclair Balser and his family lived. Sinclair Balser and his family originally took up Breeze's Station to breed horses for the Palmer goldfields, but with the decline of the gold rush, horse breeding gave way to cattle breeding and fattening. After 23 years of harsh, difficult living, including the cattle tick outbreak of the 1890s, the family abandoned the property and returned to Cooktown to work as publicans. This historic family homestead certainly took us back to unforgiving times when early pastoralists were trying to make a living in some of this remote and unforgiving land on the peninsula. After the departure of the Balsar family, Breeze's Station was used as a mustering outstation and was also a stopover point for the early packhorse mail en route to Coen after its abandonment in the 1890s. Around midday we stopped in at the Hann Crossing camping area located on the North Kennedy River, not the Hann River, which joins the North Kennedy River downstream, where we had planned to camp for the night. But after spending some time checking out the area, we decided we would keep moving as there was still half a day left, and since the road had been in such a good condition, it wasn't worth stopping. From the crossing it was about 80 kilometres to Musgrave Roadhouse. The crossing was named after the explorer William Hann, who crossed the North Kennedy River at this point in September 1872 on his expedition to explore the interior of Cape York Peninsula. The Kennedy River originates within Lakefield National Park and flows through the Cape York Peninsula and drains into the Coral Sea near Princess Charlotte Bay, with major tributaries including the Morehead and Hann rivers. The river is a major tidal river known for saltwater crocodiles, with the area renowned for its vast river systems and spectacular wetlands, especially during the wet season, when the Normanby, Morehead and North Kennedy rivers and their tributaries join to flood vast areas. However, during the dry season, rivers and creeks shrink, leaving large permanent waterholes, lakes and lagoons that attract an array of animals, particularly water birds. From here on, we seemed to be in and out of creek crossings, and did pass where they were doing work on the road. There was some amazing country in between, even passing one huge waterhole with a couple of brolgas. In places the creek crossings were very wide, and we could see where the water had washed over them. Both Rick and I could well imagine them in flood. Between Hann Crossing and Saltwater Crossing was Knifold Plains, a dramatic sprawling floodplain formed by seasonal inundations from the Hann River and Saltwater Creek systems on the northwest of Lakefield National Park, consisting of accumulated layers of alluvial silt and sediment sculptured by monsoon rainfalls into vast flat grassy wetlands. The plains are part of the broader low-lying Laura Basin, where rivers depositing sand and silt over thousands of years built up flat open floodplains. It really was a vast, fascinating and remarkable area. We crossed the tidal saltwater crossing near Low Lake and Knifield Plains, one of many bush camping sites in the area. As we were driving along, I happened to see some magpie geese on a waterhole, but was unable to get a clear photo due to there being too much shrubbery between the road and the waterhole. The road then opened out, with the shoulders still carrying signs of regrowth, as the grader had not got this far. We passed a burrow pit beside the road that was greenish colour, and wondered how it got to be that colour. At around 1:20 we pulled into Musgrave Roadhouse and stopped for a late lunch. I think Rick was trying out the hamburgers at all the roadhouses we passed, and to tell you the truth, they were all very tasty. I sat and watched the friendly cows, though showing signs of a dry season, as they wandered past the fence. The former Musgrave Telegraph Station, now known as the Musgrave Roadhouse, is located at the intersection of the Peninsula Development Road with the Lilyvale Road, approximately halfway between Cairns and Weipa, and 136 kilometres north of Laura. The Musgrave Telegraph Office was erected in 1886 and commenced operation in December of that same year. Constructed in association with the important overland Cape York telegraph line from Laura at the southern end of Cape York Peninsula to Thursday Island in the Torres Strait, it was considered one of the outstanding achievements in the development of Queensland's colonial telegraph network. The overland telegraph provided important contact between the isolated communities of the peninsula, as well as a link to southern capitals via Cooktown, and played a significant role in the development of the region. From Musgrave to Coen we had a drive of about 110 kilometres. Having enjoyed our hamburger, we continued on our way to Coen, crossing what is said to be the highest section of the Great Dividing Range, the Bamboo Range, on the Peninsula Development Road, with the road here badly corrugated. Situated within a tropical savanna climate zone, we were dealing with sand, dust, gravel, and dirt corrugations on some of the roughest roads we had travelled so far. We were yet to hit the bull dust patches, though. We crossed Little Coleman River, the Branch Creek, Duckhole Creek, and travelled through lots of undulating road with short, regular bitumen sections, signage to drive to conditions, but overall the road was a well-formed dirt road with more corrugations, especially on corners where people forgot to slow down and took them too fast. We arrived in Coen around 3:30, filled up the troopy, and then made our way to the overnight camping area just out of town. Coen is an old mining community, originally created around a repeater station in the overland telegraph line to the tip. Coen lies in the centre of Cape York and is part of the larger Cook Shire Council. In 1876, Robert Sefton found gold on the Coen River after leading a prospecting party into the interior of Cape York. He built a log fort here for protection from any hostility and prospected for gold in the surrounding country. In 1878 there was a gold rush to Coen following Sefton's return to Cooktown with 140 ounces of gold. About 150 miners flocked to the Coen field, but exploration further afield was not possible. What a day it has been! The road was so much better than what we had been expecting, and we found the bitumen sections an added bonus. We certainly were enjoying ourselves. Rick and I found a camp on the bend of the river. Sadly, it was not as nice as our last couple of camps, but we were just happy to stop for the day. Rick and I will leave you here as we enjoy sitting beside the river. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Take the time to subscribe, as that will give us more of an indication if you have enjoyed it. Give us a thumbs up. Join us next episode as we make our way to Archer River, Bramwell Junction, and on to Punsan Bay. Take care. Enjoy your travels. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Livin' Life.